Because Carrie White is a gay icon. Howdy friends, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new, welcome, and I hope you enjoy my content. Today we're talking about Stephen King's Carrie and using it as a way to explain how religious fundamentalism can harm children, especially queer children. Because Carrie White is a gay icon. More on that later. Also, a huge spoiler warning for Carrie, both the original book and the 1976 film as well. There are plenty of real-world examples of fundamentalism and all of the ways that it can affect children, but I don't want to delve into anyone's personal lives or issues or step over any boundaries at all, so we're just gonna use a fictional example to get the points across. And this isn't me saying religion bad or anything along those lines. I just want to make it really clear that I have respect for religious people and their beliefs as well, as long as they don't harm or disrespect other people. Like locking your child in a super scary looking prayer closet because they got their first period at the age of 16 or 17. If you're not going to do that to your kids, then congratulations, you're not a part of the problem. And for better or worse, telekinesis as it is in the world of Carrie doesn't exist. However, religious fundamentalism and extremism definitely do exist, and they can harm children. This is something I want to explain using Carrie White as an example and backing it up with some articles that I found while doing some serious digging. You wouldn't believe the price of some of the articles that I found on Google Scholar, honestly. And that's why you absolutely should never use sites like Sci-Hub or alternatives that are really similar in order to look at the stuff that I researched for this video. Don't use them, especially not books. See, popping them up there so you know exactly what not to look up. And you should go and look into this subject as well because it is really interesting. And maybe that's just only because I've dealt with some religious trauma. Let's get right into the fundamentals of this video. So if you don't know, religious fundamentalism, or just fundamentalism, is a religious movement characterized by a strict belief in the literal interpretation of religious texts, especially within American Protestantism and Islam. There are other definitions, of course, as there is for everything, but this is the definition that will be most used and is best suited for this video and what I'm doing here. You can find plenty of people who are actually like Margaret White out in the wild. Who knew? If you want to see takes on religious fundamentalist content creators on this platform, I totally recommend YouTube channels like Jimmy Snow, God is Gray, and Fundy Fridays. They all do so many deep dives on this stuff, and I'm not gonna reinvent the wheel here and try to do deep dives the same way that they do because they just do it so thoroughly and so well. There are also many more content creators that do the same things that they do, but these are just a few of my favorites, and they're all really worth checking out and diving down the rabbit hole to go ahead and look more into. But now that you know the deal with fundamentalism, let's go ahead and dive into how it can be harmful towards children. In this case, using Carrie White as a case study of sorts. So I'll explain some broader claims and then show where we might see this in Carrie. Mostly using the book as a backdrop, but the book and movie have lots of similarities, and there are some significant differences between the two. Anyway, there was a study done in St. Louis University that compared the rates of depression in queer people when related to parental acceptance of fundamentalists. The results found that it was a poor relationship with a parent that meant the acceptance was most important, which many people have poor relationships with their parents, and all you really want is that acceptance, so it was with the poor relations that they were more likely to experience more depression. And you might be wondering, why am I talking about being accepted as a queer person in a video that's analyzing Carrie? Put a pin in it, we'll come back to it later. We also see in another study that religious fundamentalism leads to an emphasis on needing to teach obedience, even including the use of corporal punishment. Which I'm not going to tell anyone how to parent their kids because I don't have any. But if you have to hit your kid in order to get them to respect you, you are not a respectable person at all. And you should probably check in on those anger issues before you pass that stuff down. And another study shows that religious fundamentalism can negatively impact a child's higher educational opportunities. It was shown specifically that young women were the ones most significantly harmed in their chances at higher education due to fundamentalist parenting. Specifically, the young women that wanted the higher education and didn't really agree with the fundamentalist upbringing that their parents gave to them. So we can see all of the ways that fundamentalism can cause harm to children, whether it's in a form of mental health, their physical safety, or potentially their future. And that's without getting into any ideas such as purity culture, which can be a whole video and way to analyze Carrie in and of itself. And again, just making absolute certain to clarify that I am not saying religion bad, or anything like that. Fundamentalism, however, is a harmful idea, and it can cause severe trauma within people, especially children. Where don't we see religious fundamentalism in Carrie, really? We see it all throughout Margaret White's character, and Carrie internalizes so much of her rhetoric. Still, Carrie fears this to a degree, and the thought of staying with her mother is terrifying and simply miserable to her. However, since she is so isolated from her peers, she doesn't know what else to do about it. Carrie's been isolated for her whole life due to her fundamentalist upbringings thanks to Margaret. From the start, her mom resented her because she had sex and enjoyed it, and Carrie was the result. And Margaret White has been shown to have been too extreme for even the local churches within the area that they tried to attend. All Carrie knows is her mom, really, but it's still clear that their relationship isn't perfect or even healthy in any sort of way. Especially when Margaret shoves Carrie into a prayer closet at the first sign of a whisper of an issue. It doesn't even have to be a real problem or something that's really Carrie's fault or makes her a bad person. Like when she gets her period, that's not something that you can control, and it's not something that dictates whether or not you're a good person. How a lot of fundamentalist rhetoric doesn't contribute into whether or not you're actually a good person. To them, loving someone who's the same gender as you can make you a terrible person. The right thing to do in that situation in their minds is to reject the child, which is something that I cannot fathom doing to someone else. And because Carrie has been stuck in this fundamentalist system with no reprieve, she can't communicate her feelings to anyone else. She doesn't have any friends. All she has is her telekinetic abilities that can help her out every now and then. And those are things that she doesn't even understand in terms of where they come from. However, Margaret firmly believes that her telekinetic abilities is the devil's power, as it's mentioned over and over in the book, to a point where she originally did try and want to kill Carrie, but she was convinced not to do so. And Carrie actually gets a chance to enjoy being around other people at prom. Yes, she's still carrying around her powers and all of that, but she's having a decent time at the dance. She starts to feel like she can fit in with these other kids for the first time, which is exactly what Sue Snell hoped for when she asked Tommy to ask Carrie in the first place. It sort of signals that Carrie is capable of breaking out of her fundamentalist upbringing and out of her shell and growing within society. Obviously, it would take years for someone like her to fully recover from that trauma and to actually be able to function as a regular human being, but this is an inkling of hope for her, that she doesn't have to stay at home with her mother for the rest of her life and be miserable and abused. Of course, ultimately, Carrie ends up the victim of Chris and Billy's revenge plot, and she gets pig's blood spilled all over her. And we're all really familiar with the concept of the destruction, with the fire and the telekinesis. And if you're not, then go watch Carrie, read Carrie. It's really good. I can't recommend it enough. And there really isn't much analysis to do on the destruction sequence within the context of fundamentalism, though it does instill in her that her mother is still right about a lot of things, because she did warn Carrie that things were going to go poorly. And we can see the need of approval that Carrie needs from her mom even after the prom, where she goes right back and begs for forgiveness and acceptance from her mom after the dance. She still isn't accepted as Margaret tries to kill her and kind of fails. Like, in the movie, she kind of succeeds since Carrie just takes her dead mom and they hide in the prayer closet together until the house caves in on them. But in the book, it's Sue who's with Carrie while she dies, and honestly, I like that ending a lot more because after all of the horrible things that Carrie does, she still gets comforted in death, and there's something really nice about that. It's not a happy ending by any means, but it's very cathartic. You can see my dirty pillows, as Margaret would have called them, and my shoulders. How scandalous of me, right? And if I didn't just wash this shirt last night and I had a lot more ketchup, maybe I would have gone for a total blood type of look, but we're not there yet. So I was literally researching for this video when I realized the queer coding that Carrie White has. I'm not sure if Stephen King intended for this to be the case, but I mean, she has superpowers that she was born with and can't help but have for her entire life. It isn't until she hits puberty that she really takes notice of this, and she keeps it under wraps from others for obvious reasons. And when her mom finds out what's going on, she totally is not okay with Carrie and her powers and wants Carrie to repent. You know, much like a homophobic parent would do when their child comes out, or something similar to those lines. And sure, she goes to prom with a boy, but the way she's treated by her peers also speaks to an isolation that many queer kids experience in high school, especially if they're not out yet or they haven't found any real group of friends to fit in with. Carrie is a character so many people can relate to in this aspect, actually, and after a quick little search, I found out that I was not the only one who thinks this, and that was really nice to see. And of course, this isn't the only way people find Carrie's character to be sympathetic and relatable. I know that looking back, I relate to her a lot with how she was treated by her peers, specifically in a religious setting. And I'm gonna be honest, I don't really know what I'm doing in terms of religion. Maybe I'm going through a deconstructing phase, as I think God is Gray would call it. Right now, my most pressing matter is getting through finals week, so a summer project, figuring out my spiritualness. I definitely relate to being ostracized and isolated by my peers in a religious setting. Sunday school was my own personal form of hell from 5th grade all the way through middle school. And that's just from what I can remember, but I know at that point those kids hated me. I don't really know why, but they made it really clear. I mean, they even taped my mouth shut at one point while the teacher was out of the room. And it wasn't harmful in a physical way. It wasn't like duct tape or anything. It didn't physically hurt me. It was just some flimsy Scotch tape. But the message was really clear, and they, yeah, just really hated me. And I don't know, I never really said anything about it. I didn't stand up for myself at all at the time. Maybe because it was for less than an hour once a week, and I had plenty of friends at regular school, or because I thought it wasn't that bad or that important, or I don't know, I just didn't want to put my word against a bunch of other kids. And yeah, I just don't think I realized how harmful and awful that is to do to someone at the time until I started to really look back and think about my own experiences. I've never even asked my former classmates, who I sometimes talk to, sort of vaguely keep in touch with, what they were trying to do when they were being so cruel to me. And I think that's just because it kind of feels irrelevant at this point. Middle school for me was like a long time ago. I don't know, over 6 years or something like that. I can't count that type of stuff. That's not the reason for my spiritual crisis, but it is a way that I can relate to Carrie, feeling left out and not quite being able to fit in with anyone else. And it's very isolating and it does hurt a lot. And I was lucky because I have some really great parents and I had some really great friends and a solid support system. But Carrie wasn't quite as lucky. When Carrie got home, she was bullied with a type of religious trauma that warrants every type of therapy in the book. And it's not an excuse for her killing off so much of her own town, but it is a reasoning and it's some serious motivation. When I read parts of her destroying the town, it wasn't really a girl boss or good for her type of moment. It was cathartic and it was just really interesting to finally see her be able to unleash her anger and pain on everyone else that made her feel the way that she did at the time. And I mean, it was also just entertaining because it definitely had me at the edge of my bed, clutching my hot cocoa while I was reading the book for the first time. And I just needed to get more and more of this content. And obviously, not every case of a kid having a tough upbringing is going to end in some serious form of violence, but it still leads to a bunch of emotional trauma that needs to be acknowledged and helped and solved in some way or another. So, in conclusion, Carrie White is the gay icon we all need, and all of her problems would have been solved if I was just put into Stephen King's book and allowed to give her a little smooch. And what we also need is to grow from religious fundamentalism. There is a study that shows you can use education in a public school type of setting to sort of set up a way to counteract harsh extremism or fundamentalism and show children that there is another way aside from extremism. It's something that we don't address very often within North America, like US and Canada type of area, which this study acknowledges, but we need to start doing that. That way, kids can be ostracized less often and able to truly accept themselves for who they are. If you can think of any other ways that might help religious trauma, do share them. Share with the class, you know. And also, what's your favorite version of Carrie? For me, it's the book in first place with the musical in a really close second. If you haven't listened to the musical, you should go do it. Not the Riverdale episode. Do not watch the Riverdale episode. The audio quality is not great. The original Broadway, off-Broadway cast recording, immaculate, wonderful. Love to listen to it all the time. It's got some bops and bangers. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video and more content along the lines of media analysis is up your alley, click that subscribe button and ring the little bell so you can see whatever I decide to come up with next. I hope you have a great rest of your morning, day, or night. Bye.